The war in the Middle East is expanding. Exactly 1 month after the start of Donald Trump's Operation Epic Fury, when the first US and Israeli missiles rained down on Tehran, Iran played its last and most dangerous trump card. The Yemeni Houthis officially announced their entry into the war on the side of the so-called Axis of Resistance, having already carried out 2 massive ballistic missile strikes on targets in Israel. But the main news at this hour is not the shelling itself. This is the start of the double noose scenario, which analysts, including myself, warned about back in early March. Essentially, there is a risk of a complete naval blockade. A Houthi blockade of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait could be added to Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz. My name is Alex Ipechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to support the work of this YouTube channel. You can do this by subscribing, donating, or becoming a sponsor on YouTube. How to do this? All the links and details are in the description of this video or by scanning the QR code on your screens. At the end of the episode, if you find this information important and necessary, you can support this channel, including financially. I would be grateful for that. And don't forget to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link to it is also in the description of this video. So, the Iran-backed Yemeni Houthis have announced their first attack on Israel since the start of the war in the Middle East. This happened on March 28th. Against the backdrop of new shelling, this could mean that the conflict is expanding beyond the direct confrontation between Iran, the US, and Israel. It is worth noting that the Houthis entered the war on a symbolic date, exactly 1 month after the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, was killed in an Israeli strike. On March 28, the Yemeni group Ansar Allah claimed responsibility for launching a salvo of ballistic missiles at what they described as sensitive military targets in the Eilat area. Despite the fact that the Israeli missile defense system intercepted most of the targets, the very fact of missiles being launched from Yemen means that Iran's proxy forces are entering the war. And now the official representative of the Yemeni Houthis, Yahya Sari, stated that this is, quote, the beginning of the active phase of the operation in support of our brothers in Iran, Lebanon, and Palestine. And according to Western intelligence, the Houthis received advanced anti-ship missiles and underwater drones from Iran shortly before the start of Operation Epic Fury. And now they are ready to use them against any vessel that tries to cross Krasnoyarsk. And here it's important to understand that the geography of the Middle East is essentially 2 key arteries of the world economy. I also like the phrase that the Middle East's geography is like the carotid arteries of the global economy, and if you press on them at the same time, this economy dies. On one side of the Arabian Peninsula is the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's consumption passes, and 25% of liquefied natural gas. Iran has blocked the Strait of Hormuz for a month. On the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, we have the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Red Sea, which, as you know, is the route to the Suez Canal. And that's where Yemen is, the very country that can block the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. A simultaneous blockade of both straits, or if you prefer, these vital arteries, is a doomsday scenario. Previously, if tankers could bypass the Persian Gulf blocked by Iran and avoid the Strait of Hormuz, they could take oil from the ports of the Red Sea. For example, through the Saudi East-West pipeline and through the port of Yanbu in the Red Sea. Now, even this route can be cut off by the Houthis. The last time the Houthis blocked the strait, hundreds of ships were forced to turn around and go around all of Africa via the Cape of Good Hope. This adds 15 to 20 days to the journey and triples the logistics costs. But most importantly, it completely blocks exports from the Persian Gulf countries. The only route left is for Saudi Arabia through the Suez Canal. That means they can still load tankers in Yanbu and try to send them to Europe through the Suez Canal. But the point is that the Persian Gulf countries send most of their oil to Asia, not to Europe. And here, huge risks arise. For example, a risk analysis by Goldman Sachs indicates that the world is entering a zone of resource hyperinflation. What does that mean? First, the price of oil has already broken through $100 per barrel. If the blockade of both straits lasts more than 2 weeks, analysts predict a price jump to $150 to $160 per barrel. Second, there's the Suez Canal. It's the main artery for the supply of grain and fertilizers from Europe and the Black Sea to Asia. and that's already a matter of a food crisis. Delays will lead to food shortages in countries of the global south, and this will be felt as early as April. Third, the Pentagon has already requested an additional $200 billion from Congress to launch a war against Iran. And now the Houthis' entry into the war is forcing the US to divert carrier groups from the shores of Iran to patrol the Red Sea, which weakens the pressure on Tehran. Therefore, intervention by the Houthis is exactly what was being counted on. Iran. Tehran has switched to a strategy of economic strangulation of the West, because the blockade of the el-Mandeb Strait and the closure of the Hormuz Strait is essentially checkmate. And now Trump will have to spread himself thin over two problems at once. But if we take a look at what's happening in the US, it seems as if there is no problem at all. Donald Trump said on Saturday that the war is practically already won. And the actions of the Houthis are, to quote Trump, the death throes of a terrorist regime. However, the reality looks a little different. Trump is demanding that NATO allies and Asian partners immediately send their warships to the Red Sea to escort convoys. Israel, in turn, is facing a dilemma because the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, is preparing for a ground invasion of Lebanon to finally eliminate Hezbollah. But strikes from Yemen are forcing them to redirect some air defense resources to the south. On the other hand, if the Houthis start striking the ports of Saudi Arabia, which has effectively become the logistical rear for the US in this war, it could draw Riyadh into the conflict. Let me remind you that back in 2019, the Houthis already carried out strikes on the Aramco oil refineries in Saudi Arabia. That's why I wouldn't rule out such a scenario. Just like possible attempts to attack the port of Yanbu, which would completely deprive Saudi Arabia of the ability to export oil and petroleum products. Therefore, we can state that Iran, even after being decapitated following the elimination of Khamenei, still retains the ability to paralyze the region through its proxy forces. The Houthis in Yemen are precisely the lever that turns Trump's regional operation into a global economic crisis, the blockade of two straits at once. It effectively halts all trade in this region, which has always been crucial for the entire world. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. And friends, if you'd like to support this YouTube channel, I'd really appreciate it. You can do this through donations, sponsorship on YouTube, or paid subscriptions on different platforms. Choose any option that's convenient for you. All the links and payment details are in the description for this video. That's all. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. To be continued.